Aminah, thank you so much for being on the podcast today.
Thank you for having me.
So, can you tell our listeners a little bit about who you are and what keeps you busy these days?
Well, my name is Aminah Lawson, and I am a salon owner and a product developer and manufacturer, a wife, a mommy, a homeschooler, and also a beauty educator and business coach. So all of those things keep me busy.
That's phenomenal. And you have a salon. Can you share the name of your salon?
Yes, my salon name is Salon Cree, and it's a textured hair studio. So most of our clients are curlies. We deal with all textures, and it's actually located downtown Greensboro at 217 Summit Avenue.
Right next to Greensboro Downtown Yoga, which is the studio that I no longer own, but that I opened.
I know, you told me. It's such a small world.
I know. I wish you had been there while I was there.
I know.
I think there's probably some good synergy between your salon and Greensboro Downtown Yoga.
Yeah.
Yeah. So how did you get into the work that you're doing?
Which part?
Oh, all of it. So how did you end up owning a salon?
Well, goodness. So I actually have been doing hair since I was 13.
Wow.
I got licensed 16 years ago. I keep track because I was pregnant with my oldest when I graduated from cosmetology school. So I always knew that I wanted to do hair, even though I went to A&T and I actually have my bachelor's in history. I always knew I wanted to do hair.
Mm-hmm.
And so went to school, graduated from cosmetology school, and I actually worked at a salon for a little while. I worked for someone, and I really liked the salon. It was a good experience, but when they sold their salon, and it just went a different direction than what I wanted. And so I went home, and at the time I just had my oldest son, and I was shortly thereafter got pregnant with our second son. And so it just felt like I was calling me to be home with my family and to homeschool. And so it just kind of worked out where I actually was at home for like 8 years building a business. So between homeschooling and taking care of my family, that was just what and doing hair, that was what my life was for like 8 years. And then, and I know you've experienced this when like seasons in your life are changing, things kind of get a little uncomfortable.
Mm-hmm.
And so it had just gotten to a point where my home was it didn't fit the growth that was happening.
Right.
And so I didn't really know that how big it was going to be. And so some things were just kind of divinely orchestrated where I opened up my first salon, which was on 351 MLK. I was there for 4.5 years. And that whole story, I have to tell you another time because it was just the way it happened. I'm still sometimes in awe of how divinely orchestrated it was. And so to the point where the owner was actually one of my really good friends from college that I hadn't seen in like 20-something years. And so that was my first experience. And then some things happened where I had to move from that space. And I ended up taking over the current space, and it just happened again, very divinely inspired, where the owner was in the position where he was ready to not leave the industry, but downsize. Mm-hmm. And I just happened to come along during that transition for him. And so I went in and pretty much took over his space, like within 8 weeks, and Salon Cree is now at 217 Summit Avenue.
Wow.
So,
wow.
Yeah, it's so much more to it that I have to share, but it really happened that easy. So
it's like when it's meant to happen, things just fall into place.
Everything was just in place to the point where I took over a completely furnished salon.
Wow.
So all I had to do was just make it Salon Cree, and
that's alignment right there.
Yeah.
You know. And you just wrote a book that's going to be launching. Can you tell us how you decided to write a book? Like, what was it that how did you become called to write a book?
What's so funny, so I'll say there's two parts to that. The first part came from one of my clients who's a good friend of mine, and she's been coming to me, probably 10 years she was coming to me. So, and she's moved actually to Missouri, but when she comes home, she always comes to me to get her hair done. And so on one of her trips, she was visiting about 2 or 3 years ago, and she was just sitting in a chair. And because she knows me and knows how I work, she was just like, Aminah, how many clients do you see a week? You know, and I told her, and she's like, how many hours do you work a week? And I told her that. And she's like, and how many days is that? And I was like, you know, like 3 days. I work 3 days a week. And she's just like, you see like 20 to 30 people in 3 days? And she was just like, that, you need to teach people that. And honestly, before that, I didn't even know that that was something for me to teach. You know, she was just like, yeah, like people need to know how to do that. She was like, because you still homeschool, you still have your product line, you're still a wife, mommy, you still do all these things, but you've been able to set a system in place that has allowed you to work this amount of days and see this amount of people. And so from there, I just started to write, well, what does that look like for me? And I just started to write. And honestly, before that, it didn't even occur to me that that was something to teach people, because I just assumed that either people already knew that or nobody wants to know that from me, you know?
Right.
I didn't view that as something that people wanted to see. And so after I started writing, and it's funny because I was on a call with a coaching client this morning, and I actually was like, well, what really birthed the time factor? And there's like core things for me that are really important: my peace, my freedom, and authenticity. Like those are 3 things that guide my decision making. And so for me, the time factor is a reflection of those things. And so I feel like that if those things are always present for me, that I always know that that's the path that I'm supposed to take. And so for me, the time factor was really like birthed out of those things, like my peace and freedom and authenticity. Like I need to always know and feel secure in who Aminah is. And this book is, for me, is a reflection of that.
So it sounds like those are your 3 core values.
Absolutely.
And what do each of those mean to you? Like, what does peace and freedom and authenticity, what do each of those mean to you?
For me, peace is just, I would say, I guess my best definition is calm in the midst of turmoil. So even when life is happening, I don't feel overwhelmed by it. And knowing when to pull away when it does feel like that.
Right.
I am a stickler for disconnecting when needed. And so I'm that person who will shut off, and when I need that, because I need my mind to be clear, like that's peace for me. I will shut off so that I can get back to a place where I can think and see and kind of move in a flow. Like that's really important to me. Freedom for me is just the ability just to make decisions and get them done. I was also talking this morning, like freedom for me is like when I want to do something, I should be able to just have the freedom to do it. If it doesn't feel right, I should have the freedom to pull out of it. And so I just like, for me, flow is so important. Things should feel right. Things should flow smoothly. They shouldn't be forced. They shouldn't feel contrived. And so for me, freedom is sort of a reflection of all of those things. And then, like, I think with authenticity, I just have to feel like this is something Aminah would do. And most of my decisions have to be based and grounded in that. If it does not feel genuine, if it feels forced, if it does not feel like, if it feels uncomfortable, and I say uncomfortable in the sense of if I'm making a decision that I know doesn't feel right for me, and it doesn't feel natural for me, and it doesn't connect with what my moral compass is,
right.
I can't do that.
Can't do it.
I can't do that.
Yeah. I mean, you're kind of, to me, preaching to the choir a little bit because core values, for me, it's the work that I do with clients. It's like, what are your core values, and how can you begin taking the baby steps if you're out of alignment with those to get back into alignment with those? So in your book, how do you, what's the process that you are asking people reading to go through to get there?
I think the first part is, and it's funny because my first chapter was actually the last chapter I wrote, and it had to do with not comparing your journey with others. You know, we're in this social media culture where it's like comparison is like in your face all the time. And so the first thing I ask people to do is to make it a point to not compare your journey with someone else's. Your journey is your journey. And what that looks like is what it looks like for you. I remember getting a little frustrated recently with the progression of my line. Like, I was feeling like I've been doing this for so long, and how come I'm not where maybe someone else is? And I remember my best friend pulling me aside. It was like, your journey is your journey. And what that looks like is different. And so the things that you're reaching towards actually don't have anything to do with what they're reaching towards. And so that was just like my aha moment. It's like, you know what you're working towards. I've always wanted to be a beauty educator. I've always wanted to, I love encouraging other women business owners. I love encouraging people. And so what I had to get back to was that word, authenticity. Those are if that's at my core, then I have to make sure that all that I'm doing goes back to those things. Right. And so I think the first thing I want people to understand is like establishing what your values are, and establishing that as a business owner, you're your CEO and you get to decide what that looks like. You don't allow people to dictate your journey. You get to set up and decide what that looks like. And once I feel like people establish that, it makes it very easy to put systems in place to support so that you get to your goals.
Yeah. So yeah. Well, okay. What's something you've done recently that's taken a tremendous amount of courage and was really scary, but you're glad you did it?
This book.
Why was it scary? Like, what made it scary for you?
It was scary because it's like, you know, sometimes you're afraid to let people hear your thoughts. Mm-hmm. And so at first it was like, I was afraid for a couple of things. Since it was like, oh, do people even want to hear this? Is this something that's even needed? And on top of that, I was just feeling like I didn't want to be judged by how I write exactly the way I speak. And so, but that's how I write. And so that's how I communicate. And so I had to remember that a lot of people like me because of how I communicate. Yes. And so that was a little scary for me, was jumping out and writing this book for those reasons. And I think just as I continue to do it, it just felt right. And I felt like, well, this is helping me, so surely it can be of service to someone else.
Yeah. But
that was a little scary, just being able to say, here guys, this is what I wrote, you know.
Yeah, and who is this book for?
Anyone wanting balance in life and balance on their own terms. You know, I wish you knew how many times people would, especially because I only work 3 days a week, and in the beauty industry, I work 3 days a week, and I don't work on weekends, and that's like taboo in the beauty industry. And so what I want people to realize is that you get to decide what that looks like as a business owner.
Right.
So for me, it's about creating balance and setting your own standard for what your business looks like. It's for those people.
So a lot of business owners.
Yes, absolutely. Absolutely.
Do they have to be in the beauty industry for this to apply? Okay.
No. When I first started it, I think I thought it was for salon owners and stylists, but the more I wrote, I was like, oh no, this is actually for business owners. Absolutely.
Yeah. And so what made it possible for you to break through the scary and write the book?
I think, so my writing process it seems like it's the same because I'm actually working on my second book. And I think once I saw my outline and my table of contents, I knew that I had substance there. And then after that, it was done. It was like, okay, because you have something to say now. Now we know that you have something to say because you have all these things to discuss. And once that happened, honestly, I just was writing, and it just kind of came out.
That's phenomenal. You know, I'm someone that's kind of working on a book and having problems with it. Like, what advice do you have for me? Or anyone else out there who's got a big, scary task in front of them?
I think the first part is to really just fine-tune, like, what do I want to say? What do I want to say? What do I want to convey? And just start writing out what that looks like. Because I think that was really how this started. In my intro, I just talk about my first experience with being in a salon before I was even a stylist and what that felt like for me. And so I think that once I established that, then I was able to build on, okay, this is why there's a disconnect in business. Because as a child, I noticed this. And just write and just do it, you know?
Yeah.
Like I said, I think definitely just start your writing process. And I feel like it'll just kind of come out after a while. And you're just going to have to just do it.
Just do it.
Just step out of the boat and just do it.
I love that. So I pull an animal spirit card for everyone who comes on the podcast.
Okay.
Would you like an animal spirit card?
Sure.
So I love these because I think it's a really fun game that gives us a great lens as to where we are right now.
Okay.
And normally I do them at the beginning as an icebreaker, but sometimes I forget and then
Okay.
we do them in the middle or the
Okay.
end. But I think they're very fun. Okay. What I'm going to have you do is I'm going to have you put your hands on the deck, close your eyes, and take a couple big deep breaths.
Okay.
And then when you're ready, you can open your eyes, and with your left hand, you're going to cut the deck into 3 piles.
Okay.
And then flip over the top card of whichever one you'd like.
Okay.
Ooh, you got a spirit card. Okay, so this deck is divided up into the 4 elements. So air, fire, water, earth. And then there's 7 spirit cards, which are not creatures of this earth.
Okay.
But it's when we're surrounded by spirit, when
Okay.
grace is surrounding us, and
Okay.
they correspond with the 7 chakras.
Okay.
This corresponds with your 2nd chakra, and it is the sea serpent. And I'm going to read you what the sea serpent says because it's really cool. Okay. Healing emotional wounds, expressing desires. The sea serpent represents the energy of expression, whether it's emotions, creativity, sensuality, or desire. The sea serpent helps us move and direct our energy into a healthy current. When the essence of this card is in balance, we express ourselves creatively and sexually without fear or shame. We know what we desire most. Our heart is at ease and our relationships are meaningful and enduring. We loosen the grip of self-judgment and we let the cool waters of forgiveness in to heal our wounds. When the energy of the sea serpent is not yet activated, our emotions and creativity are left in the muddy waters. The current of expression stagnates in some areas of our lives and floods in other places. It's important to remember no matter what the waters of our emotional life look like, the sea serpent loves us just the same. Like a mother, she wraps herself around us in a gesture of protection. She supports us as we learn to express our true nature. The sea serpent and the 2nd chakra. The subtle energy of the sea serpent occupies the area of the Svadhisthana chakra, located deep within the pelvic bowl. This chakra is known as our center of creativity and desire and is associated with the water element. Svadhisthana translates as in her abode, indicating this chakra is the home of the Divine Mother, or Kundalini herself. How does that land for you?
It's interesting. Just listening to some of the things about like forgiveness and creativity and emotions. That's it's interesting to hear.
Yeah, it's like you're totally. No, just with writing a book, it seems like you're really in balance with that energy.
Okay.
Like, your creativity is obviously flowing right on out of you. So
Yeah.
it's like you're tapped into that.
Yeah.
Like, and just what you were saying at the beginning of our interview, it's like you seem so in alignment with what you want and what your needs are. And it's like that seems to reflect itself.
That's new though.
Okay,
That's
so
new.
what took you there? What got you to be able to be in alignment that way? So
I
you
think-
weren't always in alignment with peace, freedom, and authenticity?
No.
Okay, so what got you there?
What got me there? Definitely my husband. I think what I like most about him, and I've always liked about him even when we were friends, was his honesty. Like, he's always been who he is. And it did not matter who he was around, he was always who he was. And I think it took a long time for me to get to that point because I wasn't raised to be that free. And so I think him helping me through some of my insecurities and like still like liking me and loving me even through my flaws, that definitely was like a huge part of that, I just recall I've always like really had a struggle with my weight, and even after having the boys, you know, putting on more weight and just not ever feeling judged because of that. And he was just like, you know, I love you. Like, you know, I would never make you feel bad about that, you know. And so I think that part freed me up. And I think in terms of the authenticity part, that's been a process for me. I feel like this year I really, really got back to, like really got to that place. Mm-hmm. And I think I would message you. It really started with my birthday this year. I was just like, my friends were like, oh, we want to do this, this, and this, and this. And I was like, I don't want to do that. That's not what I want to do. And I booked my own photo shoot, and my friend came and shot me. I wore what I wanted to wear. I did what, you know, I hung out with my friends later on. And I just started this year with saying, if it's not what Aminah wants to do, or if it's not what Aminah is being guided to do, I'm just not doing that. And so, yeah.
How do you connect with that guidance?
Definitely through prayer, through quiet time, a lot of quiet time. So I think one of the reasons, you know, I don't just not work 3 days a week because I just don't want to work the rest of the week, but I need that time to be balanced. And so I have to have my quiet time. I have to take out time just to hear from other people sometimes. Sometimes I do need to hear from people who I know are going to give me good counsel. And I'm a reader too. So I have to have all of those things in place. And so whether it's like scriptures or self-help or, you know, motivational books, or even sometimes hearing other people's stories, like I like to read. And so I think a combination of those things is what helps me to stay in that space. Definitely.
That's phenomenal. Okay, if you could sit down your high school self, mm-hmm. what would you tell her? What does she need to know?
I think the first thing is be comfortable in yourself. I don't think that I was comfortable. I really feel like it's just been like the past 5 or 6 years really where I've gotten to be more comfortable with myself. Mm-hmm. And definitely be comfortable with yourself. Know what you want, and make sure your decisions serve who you see yourself being. Like, don't make decisions based off of other people and what it is that they want. Don't do that.
Yeah. And your book, how can people order your book right now?
So they can actually go online to AminahLawson.com and click on the time factor, and the book will pop up there. But also, if they can follow me on Instagram at Aminah Lawson, and then I'm also on Facebook at Aminah L. Lawson, and so they can find the link to purchase the book to pre-order. So right now we are in the pre-ordering stage, and so they can purchase it.
Yeah, when's the release date?
So the book is actually done. So this is the book, so it's done. I just had to kind of comb through it this week and just make sure it felt right and put my hands on it and just kind of make a few little adjustments. So pre-ordering is going on right now, and honestly, we should have the books like in the next 2 to 4 weeks.
That's fantastic.
So yeah.
And you teach workshops.
I do.
All over. What are your workshops on?
So I teach with a few companies. I have my company, which is Salon Career Education, and we have the proper blow dry class that I offer, but I also offer salon mentoring programs. So if a stylist or a salon is feeling like I'm not growing, I'll kind of come in and watch them, see how they work, see what adjustments they need to make. And honestly, a lot of what I'm doing is kind of coaching them through this process.
Right.
But then I also work with Head Shape Matters, which is a cutting company that I cut with. And then I also work with Blown Away Today, which is a blow dry company that I work with.
So people can find you at all of those places as well if they want to work with you.
Mm-hmm.
And how do you live a life of abundance?
How do I live a life of abundance? Honestly, I feel like that just goes back to those three things. Like, and I think in terms of it manifesting in the natural, like one of the things I do every year since my husband and I have been married, we have our vacation which is usually our anniversary, blocked off every year. So everyone knows, do not call the Lawsons
during that time. Because it's sacred.
Yeah, that's our time. And it's our boys look forward to it. So it's not just our time, but it's our family time. I make sure that happens. And I don't know, I just feel like that's our time as a family to kind of shut off and disconnect. And then I also make sure that I block off time for myself like twice a year. And so sometimes that means my husband drops me off at a hotel and I don't even take my car with me so that I can really be still. That may mean that I find a spiritual retreat and I just go away where they don't have internet or anything. Yeah. So for me, my abundance comes from my being still, being able to be still and kind of reboot and refresh. Like that's really important to me.
Yeah. Aminah, thank you so much for sharing your wise words today.
Thank you.
Thank you so much.
You're so welcome.
We power packed that one.
Did we? I wasn't sure.
Yeah, I feel like we power packed a lot into like a short period of time. Yeah, thank you.
You're so welcome.
So I just think it's so interesting.